Thank you, everyone, for subscribing to Infinitely Productions. If you have not done so, please click the bell and subscribe, and we hope you enjoy our content.
They go ahead and process it.
Sure.
They go ahead and process it. Committee will come to order. This afternoon, the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations returns again to its examination of corruption in professional boxing. The subcommittee's investigation, which was initiated early last year by Ranking Minority Member Senator Roth, resulted last August in the first of what has become a continuing series of hearings. The August hearings focused on the role of state regulatory agencies and sanctioning bodies in protecting the interests of professional boxers. Early last month, the subcommittee received additional testimony from a panel of medical experts who outlined their concerns regarding a variety of health and safety issues affecting professional boxers and offered a number of recommendations to address them. At that time, we also heard from cable television network executives who described their industry's involvement in professional boxing, and from Congressman Bill Richardson, a longtime proponent of the need to establish federal regulation and oversight of professional boxing in our country. In today's hearings, we turn to yet another of the significant questions facing professional boxing, the role or alleged role of organized crime therein. We will hear first from the minority staff, who will present a summary of their findings in this regard, or we'll have a witness first and then the minority staff will follow that. Then I guess we'll start off then with the one-time Gambino organized crime family underboss, Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. He'll be our first witness, and then we will follow with minority staff. As many of you know, Mr. Gravano was the government's key witness in the recent trial and conviction of one-time Gambino crime family boss John Gotti. Reflecting his long experience as a Gambino crime family member, Mr. Gravano will offer testimony based on his personal knowledge of the relationship between criminal elements and professional boxing. The remaining witnesses to be heard are boxers and those associated directly or indirectly with them. As before, I want to commend Senator Roth and his staff for their hard, diligent, and effective work. Allegations of organized criminal involvement in boxing have long been a concern of those in Congress worried about the sport's safety and credibility. Indeed, this very question was foremost among those raised more than 30 years ago by Senator Estes Kefauver, whose investigation of professional boxing revealed widespread and pervasive involvement on the part of organized crime individuals and interests at that time. With this historical record in mind, I look forward to today's testimony. To the extent that it confirms or disproves present organized criminal activity in professional boxing, it will assist us in more accurately assessing the sport's integrity, viability, and long-term prospects. Senator Roth, we appreciate your leadership here and the leadership of your staff, and we will, I'll turn it over to you for your statement, and then we'll have our first witness.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we resume our inquiry into corruption in professional boxing, I want to thank you for your cooperation during the course of this investigation and to thank your staff for their support. More than 30 years ago, after the last Senate hearing on professional boxing, Senator Kefauver stated, and I quote, "Professional boxing has had too many connections with the underworld." What is the current state of underworld connections with boxing? In our hearings last August, we heard testimony supported by FBI surveillance tapes that 4 organized crime families were involved in arranging a single meeting in 1983 between undercover agents, organized crime figures, and one of boxing lending promoters. The purpose of this meeting was to discuss during a boxing promotion to launder drug money. And what about today? Well, I'd like to be able to say that professional boxing has cleaned up its act, and organized crime is no longer among the sport's many problems. But as we will hear today, this is not what the evidence shows. Instead, the evidence shows that the tentacles of organized crime still extend into the boxing ring, squeezing the mob's cutout of boxers. Unfortunately, state boxing regulators have been and continue to be unable to cut off these tentacles. Of course, the stakes are higher, since there's potentially much more money to be made in boxing today. Former middleweight champ Jake LaMotta earned a total of $1 million in his 13-year boxing career that ended in 1954. Today, it's not unusual for our top-ranked boxer to make that much in a single fight. The more money to be made, the more the mob is interested in boxing. A former captain in the Colombo crime family told us that during our August hearings. And as we will hear today from another organized crime member, the mob has adapted to the changing box market. Today, the mob is less likely to fix fights and more likely to seek control of individual boxers, managers, or promoters, and thus collect its share from their big paydays. The boxer may even be an unwitting dupe in the whole scheme. However, as with the other problems we have found in boxing, it's the boxer and the public who lose, whether the boxer knows it or not. And the irony is that while boxing and the mob's methods have changed, the regulatory system designed to protect the boxer remained basically unchanged from when Senator Kefauver first found it to be inadequate. Senator Kefauver concluded, and again I quote, "Major boxing contests, because of their interstate character, are presently beyond the power of any state to regulate fully and effectively. As a result, while it's called the sweet science, boxing often turns sour for those the system is supposed to protect." And every day in gyms throughout this country, in big cities and small towns, young men spend countless hours training in the hopes of achieving a dream. And unfortunately, we have found that they often become victims of a system riddled with abuses, a system that cannot protect their health and safety, a system that cannot protect them from financial exploitation. The dream often becomes a nightmare. And I believe this investigation has shown that it's time for all of us to wake up to the fact that the professional boxing industry is unwilling and perhaps unable to police itself. We owe it to these young men to establish a system that works as hard outside the ring to protect them as they do inside the ring. And I look forward to working with my colleagues to achieve that goal. Once again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your leadership and support.
Thank you, Senator Roth. Senator Cohen or Senator McCain, if you either have any opening comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I include my statement in the record?
Without objection, will be part of the record.
You want me to make my security announcement first? Sure.
Okay. Before we bring in the witnesses, let me just get a couple of things straight and get it clear here. The Capitol Police will ensure that no spectators, because of very high security concern during this particular witness's testimony, no spectators will be permitted to stand anywhere in the hearing room during this witness's testimony today. Spectators will be confined to the available seats in the audience. No spectators will be permitted to enter or leave the hearing room during the witness's testimony, and that includes cameras and equipment. Also, no still photographers will be permitted in the well in front of the witness table during the testimony of the witness. We will appreciate everyone's understanding and cooperation in that regard. These are security measures that are essential based on the best information we have. When everything's been secured, and I'll leave that up to our law enforcement people here, then they can bring the witness in.
Mr. Chairman, okay. If you would remain standing, please. Our first witness is Salvador Gravano. Mr. Gravano is currently in federal custody and cooperating with the government while awaiting sentencing. Mr. Gravano has testified as a government witness in several major trials and will be testifying in additional upcoming cases. Given the sensitive nature of Mr. Gravano's position as a cooperating witness, we have agreed to limit his testimony to matters relating to professional boxing. We appreciate the cooperation of all subcommittee members in abiding by this understanding.
Mr. Gravano, we swear in all the witnesses before this subcommittee, so if you'll hold up your right hand, I'll give you the oath. Do you swear the testimony you give before this subcommittee will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You can be seated. Mr. Gravano, you have an attorney with you today.
Mr. Chairman, my name is John Gleason. I'm an assistant United States attorney in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Chief of the Organized Crime Section, and I'm supervising the criminal investigations in which Mr. Gravano is participating. I've worked with the staff of the subcommittee in facilitating his appearance here today.
We appreciate
He is
that.
represented by counsel, obviously, it's not me.
Right. Thank you. We appreciate your cooperation. Senator Roth.
Gravano, would you please proceed with your testimony?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the
Pull
subcommittee.
that microphone right up and talk directly into it. You can get it right in front of you and maybe tilt it up a little bit where you can speak into it. Take your time and just talk right into the mic.
Okay, thank you very much.
It would have to be a little bit closer. Try again.
How's that?
I think even closer.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee. My name is Salvatore Gravano. Early in my life, I was given the nickname Sammy the Bull. I have been in jail since December of 1990, when I was arrested with John Gotti. I was his underboss and second of command of the Gambino family. I have been involved with organized crime since 1968, when I became associated with a guy named Shorty Spiro of the Colombo family. I committed many types of crimes when I was with Shorty, including my first murder. In 1972, I was officially released from the Colombo family to the Gambino family. I became a made member of the Gambino family in 1976. At that time, Paul Castellano was the boss of the Gambino family. In December of 1995, John Gotti, I, along with some others, murdered Paul Castellano. We took over the family. John Gotti became the boss. A couple of weeks later, I became a captain. In 1987, I became acting Gunzlier of our family. I later became the official Gunzlier. In January of 1990, I accepted the position of official underboss, which I held until I began to cooperate with the government in 1991. I decided to cooperate before we, meaning me, John Gotti, and our acting Gunzlier, Frank Locascio, went to trial. I testified in that trial and some others. I'll be testifying at more trials in the near future. As part of my deal with the government, I pleaded guilty to a charge that has a 20-year maximum sentence rather than the life sentence that I was taking if convicted at trial. As part of my cooperation, I told the government about my life of crimes, including the fact that I participated in 19 murders. As a member of our family's administration, I helped John Gotti run the family. My primary responsibility was controlling the construction industry in New York. I did this by working with union officials and companies that were owned or controlled by our family, and by dealing with other families who also controlled certain unions and companies. I have been asked to testify here today about the mob's involvement in professional boxing. I don't know much about what other families have been doing in boxing, but I do know about our family. The Gambino family has basically gotten out of boxing sometime around or before 1960. We were involved in other things that made more money. But I have always had an interest in boxing. I boxed a little when I was in the Army, and I picked it up again a few years before I was arrested. I would go to Gleason's gym in Brooklyn every week and work out. Sometimes I would go a few rounds with other people who trained there. I often attended fights in New York and New Jersey, including the Mike Tyson-Larry Holmes fight in 1988 in Atlantic City, which I attended with John Gotti. I got to know a heavyweight named Ronaldo Snipes and his manager, who I knew as Sal. I tried to set up a fight between Snipes and Francisco Damiani, who was the undefeated European and WBO heavyweight champ. Damiani was with an organized crime family in Italy. Since our family had close ties with the Italian family, I was able to set up a meeting with Damiani's people. They came to New York and we discussed the possibility of a fight with Snipes. At that time, Damiani was already scheduled to fight Ray Mercer. One of the things I did to try to arrange a Damiani-Snipes fight was to reach out to set up a meeting with a guy who was in charge of boxing for Donald Trump. I believe his name was Mark Edis. Snipes, his manager Sal, and I met with this Mark in Atlantic City. He told us that a fight between Damiani and Snipes would sell. Mark thought it would be even bigger if Snipes had a high ranking with one of boxing's sanctioning bodies. Joe Watts, who was an associate in our family, told me that he had someone in Las Vegas who could help us get a ranking for Snipes. Watts arranged a meeting for me with Joey Curtis, a boxing referee in Las Vegas. Joey Curtis has once visited our club, the Ravenite Social Club in New York City. So I went to Las Vegas with two of my friends and our wives. After we had dinner with Curtis, I took him aside and asked him if he can get Snipes moved up in the rankings. Curtis said he could move Snipes up in the rankings of the World Boxing Council, which is based in Mexico. Curtis said that this would cost $10,000, but because it was a favor for John Gotti, he might be able to get it done for about $5,000. My idea all along was to use Damiani-Snipes fight as a setup fight to get Damiani a big payday against Mike Tyson. My plan was for Snipes to have a high ranking and then make it look good but lose to Damiani. I never discussed this with Snipes because Damiani lost to Mercer, which put Damiani out of the picture for a major fight. I'm sure that we would have had no problem in convincing Snipes to lose. Another boxer our family has an interest in is Buddy McGirt, who recently lost his WBC welterweight title. His manager is Al Cerdo, who is a Gambino family associate. Al Cerdo is with Jojo Carrazzo, who is a made member of our family. I know Al Cerdo is with our family because Jojo put it on record with his captain, Peter Gotti. Also, a beef came up between our family and the Buffalino family about who McGirt was with. Eddie Scandria, the Gonzalier of the Buffalino family, complained to John Gotti that the Buffalinos had a piece of McGirt. Gotti told me to arrange a meeting with Scandria and Jojo to resolve the beef. I actually had several meetings with Jojo and Scandria about this. Jojo said that he had paid Scandria some money to walk away from McGirt. But now Scandria wanted back in because McGirt had done well and was getting bigger purses. After hearing both of them, I recommended to John Gotti that Jojo was right and that McGirt should stay with Jojo and our family. Eddie Scandria was not satisfied with my decision and kept coming back for more meetings. I got tired of meeting with Scandria about this, but out of respect for his position and age, we had Frank Locascio, who was part of our administration, continue to talk to him. But our position never changed. Cerdo and McGirt stayed with our family. I should point out that the person who was really with us was Al Cerdo. His relationship with Jojo Carrazzo is how we had a piece of McGirt. McGirt is a fighter, and although Cerdo brought him by the club once to introduce him to some people, it wouldn't really be fair for me to say that he was an associate of organized crime. But Cerdo was with us, and that gave us our interest in McGirt. Our family was not the only family in boxing. Although I do not know the details, I know several other families are involved in boxing in some way. But you should know that our involvement in boxing has changed from the way it used to be. A lot of people think that organized crime makes its money by fixing fights and betting on the winner. That really doesn't happen anymore. The purses have gotten so big, it doesn't make sense to fix a fight in order to collect a bet. While we would consider fixing a fight in order to set up for a big payday fight, like I had in mind for Damiani, the money is in the purses, not in the betting. Besides, boxing is a risky business for bookmakers. You couldn't bet big money on a fight even if you wanted to. So the interest today is getting a piece of a successful boxer. Until a boxer reaches a certain level, there is not much money to be made because the purses are small. But once a boxer becomes successful, the family that has him can profit from that success. Now, because of the size of the purses have gotten so big over the past 20 years, organized crime is more and more interested in getting back into it. At this time, I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have about organized crime and boxing.
Thank you, Mr. Gravano, and I'll ask you just a few questions and then turn to Senator Roth and my colleagues. You state here that you, quote, you couldn't bet big money on a fight even if you wanted to, end quote. What do you call big money?
I would imagine from anywhere from 40, 50,000 and up.
You can't place bets any larger than $30,000-$40,000 on a fight today?
Not with bookmakers in the street, no. They probably wouldn't take that kind of action.
And has that changed over the years? You could bet big money in the past and can't now, or what?
Yes, years ago, the purses were rather small, and they would filter out the betting, and they were more likely to get the bet in years ago than they are today.
Why is it that bookmakers won't take big bets on fights today? Do they worry about the fights being fixed? What are they worrying about?
They worry, I would imagine they worry about fights being one-sided. I don't know as far as being fixed, but some of the fights are total mismatches, and they really wouldn't want to get involved in the action of it.
And there's no way to establish odds, is that right, when you got a mismatch?
Well, they do, but they won't take big money. They'll take small money, 1,000, 2,000, maybe 5,000, maybe even 10,000 if you find a fairly large bookmaking operation. But I really don't believe that they would go overboard in with bets on.
When did that change? What time period? And what caused it to change?
I
They've
would
always
imagine,
been one-sided fights, have they not?
but I would imagine that they walked away. When organized crime walked away from the boxing industry, I believe our betting slowed down. I believe the whole thing stopped in that area.
When did organized crime walk away from the boxing industry?
In the time when Rocky Marciano and people like that were involved, our people, meaning mob people, were involved, and we had closer ties to boxing, and I would imagine there was a lot more betting and a lot more situations. Bookmaking and bookmakers, I think, became a little more sophisticated. There's even some tracks, horse betting races, and some tracks that they would stay away from and they wouldn't take action on. There is also some games that they wouldn't take action on, but they might take action on, if you wanted to call a knockout, which round or something like that, which would make the bet very, very hard and complicated.
And what were the ventures that were so profitable that organized crime basically decided to walk away from boxing after the Marciano era? What things shifted in organized crime then? Was that when organized crime started getting into narcotics, or what were the things that were so lucrative that organized crime lost interest in boxing?
I believe at that time, organized crime became more sophisticated. We got into unions, construction, shipping, garment, garbage, and they became a lot more lucrative than the boxing industry. Prices were very, very small.
Would that have been in the 1950 time frame, 50s,
50s, 60s, yes, that's why I
Right,
said in the
right.
60s and before.
Right. When did organized crime get back into boxing?
Well, over a period of time recently, we've had an interest. Again, talking about my own family, going down to Gleason's gym, I met some fighters and tried to put something together. I had conversation with John Gotti and myself, And John had urged me to see if we can reach out and put together some possible gyms or promoters or fights and see if we can get back involved in the boxing industry. In that period, I found out that we would be able to reach certain people who are rather successful in the boxing industry, and I felt that given enough time, we would be able to go back into it.
And what time frame, during what time frame was that, when you had these discussions with John Gotti?
This was a while, maybe a year, maybe a little bit more before I was arrested and stopped, maybe even a little bit before that.
So it's been in the last 5 years then?
Yes.
What kind of payoff did you expect and anticipate from getting back involved? You were going to get a certain percentage of the purses? Is that how you were going to get paid?
Well, there's a lot of different benefits from it. We were, at one point, I myself negotiated to buy Gleason's Gym in Brooklyn because it had a name and a reputation. We would probably start off with getting a gym. We would have some trainers like an Al Certo, Bring McGurk, or other people to train there. If the prices became very big and lucrative, when you get into the bracket of $500,000 and better, we would be able to chew up some of the money within the gym through training expenses, not only just a direct kickback, but through training expenses, by putting people to work at that particular point in his corner, for promotional, for many, many reasons. And then we also felt that some of the fighters would have been good, aside from just the money. When some of our people were in trouble and at trials, we would be able to bring some of them down at the trial to lend support to the people who are on trial, so that some of the juries would be impressed on people who were there and maybe sway some of the juries. There was a lot of different reasons why we thought it would be good. Contacts, connections with Trump, Steve Wynn, or anybody in that capacity. We wouldn't just stop strictly, our eyes wouldn't stop strictly at boxing once we got into the circle.
So you wanted to use this for a broader, more pervasive influence then?
Well, we wouldn't stop strictly at boxing. We would put somebody, if I was able to start it, we would have probably put a captain in our family in charge of that boxing industry. And once we had a foothold in it, yes, we would have branched off in as many areas as we could have.
I understand that both Buddy McGirt and Snipes attended parts of John Gotti's trial. Do you know whether they were asked to do so, and if so, who would have asked them?
Well, again, it would have been, in McGirt's case, it would have been Al Certo. It would have been John Gotti to reach Jojo Carrazzo, who would have asked Al Certo to bring McGirt down to the trial, that it would look good. As far as Ronaldo Snipes, he was close to me. I don't really know who asked him at that particular point.
Thank you very much. Senator Rault.
In answer to a question to the chairman, you stated there were certain people in boxing who you thought you could reach, and that's one of the reasons you went back into boxing. Who were those people that you thought you could reach?
Well, in some of our conversations, when we tried to set up the fight with Ronaldo Snipes and Damiani to reach Donald Trump, we reached an entertainer. His name is Jimmy Roselli. Jimmy Roselli has a brother-in-law who's a heavyweight gambler and gambles in Atlantic City. And we used that resource to get to a Donald Trump. We know that Lou Duva was close to people in the Genovese family. I really don't know if he's with these people, but we do know that he has relationships with some of those people, and we would be able to reach him. Marvin Hagler was very, very close with the Petrocelli brothers. We believed that one of them might even be a made member of one of the New England families, but they were his trainers, and we would be able to reach them. At one point, we reached out for Don King who gave us a message back that he had problems with the government and problems with taxes, and he didn't think it was the right time to meet. And we reached Raymond Petriaca from a New England family who would reach a Cleveland family, and they had access to Don King, seemed like some control over Don King, and they would explain to him at the next request to meet him for John Gotti and myself that it would be in his best interest that he would meet with us. And we knew that Nicky Scoffo had some interest in some fighters and other families around the country. There's a guy named Andrew Russo, who was a captain in the Colombo family, who has some sort of tie to Vito Antifumo. So knowing this base knowledge, we felt that if we went back in, some of these places is areas that we could have got into. When I met with Joey Curtis in Las Vegas, he told me that he knew Steve Wynn personally, and asked me if the Ronaldo Snipes Damiani fight would come off. Maybe we could even talk with Steve Wynn. So I did realize that we were able to reach different areas and different people.
Now, you've used the term with, reach, made. Can you explain exactly what you mean by the terms when you say you testify about being with a particular organized crime family? What does that mean generally and specifically? Let me ask you that first.
Well, when you're with an organized crime family or a made member in a family, the made member goes to his captain and puts you on record that you're with him and our family. His benefits, whatever connections, like I had just mentioned, we have, he can have. If any other family within the country, or out of the country for that matter, would ever try and move in on him, muscle in on him, it couldn't happen. He was already on record as being with us. And he would be under our protection, our umbrella, so to speak.
But he wouldn't be made.
No, no. A made member is another stage when a man, after a period of years, is with somebody and is brought into a meeting and is given the oath and becomes a made member.
He's a full member, in other words.
He's a blood member.
A blood member.
Yes.
And what do you mean by the word reach?
Well, reach, if we don't know Donald Trump himself, we have ways to reach him. And it's just a term I'm using. In other words, we would use Jimmy Roselli or Jimmy Roselli's brother-in-law, or Bobby Sasso, who controls 282 Union in New York. And Donald Trump obviously does a lot of construction. And if Bobby Sasso, the president of 282, the Teamsters, who is with our family, would reach Donald Trump and tell him that we were interested in a meeting with him. When I say we, I don't mean me or John Gotti. I don't know if Trump would meet us, but it would open the door for a meeting with Snipes' manager or Damiani's manager or whoever we put in front of this thing to make it look legitimate. After a while, myself and John Gotti and people like us would probably take a back seat to somebody who's a little bit cleaner.
Now, you said you know that McGirt is with the Gambino family because Carrozza put it on the record with Peter Gotti. What does it mean to put something on record?
Well, when a man is a made member, he goes to his captain, which is his supervisor right above him. He goes to him and he puts it on record with him on what he's doing, what businesses he has, who he has with him. This goes on record with his captain. His captain will bring it up to the administration. So ultimately, the boss has a good idea what the family has in many different industries, what contacts, who has within the family, so that if I wanted to get into boxing, or if we wanted to get into boxing, we would know immediately that we can call for Pete Gotti to send for JoJo. We know we would be able to get Al Cerdo and Buddy McGirt through that avenue. If a different captain, let's assume, I'm just using this as an example, was close with a Lou Duva, we would reach that captain to reach a Lou Duva. But ultimately, the boss and the administration would know who has what. It's just a matter of putting it, that's what we mean by putting it on record.
You mentioned Peter Gotti. Who is he?
Peter Gotti is John Gotti's brother, but more importantly, he's a captain within our family.
Now, is it possible that Buddy McGirt did not know that part of his earnings were going to organized crime?
It's very possible, Senator.
Very possible.
Yes.
Now, you testified that several meetings were held to settle a dispute between the Gambino and Buffalino families concerning who owned parts of boxer Buddy McGirt's contract. I'd like you to watch an FBI surveillance videotape from November 15, 1989, and identify, if you can, the three individuals shown on this tape. You have to look, I think, at this screen here.
You want me to answer, Senator Huso?
Yes, if you would, please.
The one in the middle, I believe to be Eddie Scandria. The one on the right is me, and the one on the left is Jojo Carrazzo.
Now, these are the individuals who were involved in the dispute concerning which one owned part of McGirt's contract. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you recognize the location shown by this videotape?
That's Mulberry Street, Manhattan. It's the Ravenite Club, which is the headquarters for the Gambino family, one of the headquarters for the Gambino family.
Now, why were you out walking rather than inside of the club discussing the matter?
Of course, we believe that the FBI had electronic surveillance in a lot of different areas, so when we talked, we usually took what we called a walk talk. We didn't believe it would be picked up by electronic surveillance,
Was
or
this
cameras for that matter.
Was this one of the meetings concerning which organized crime family owned a piece of McGirt's contract?
Yes, it was.
Now, how do you know that this particular videotape depicts one of the McGirt meetings?
I've never met with Eddie Scandria about anything other than McGirt before or after.
So that was the only meeting you had with
The only
Scandria.
meetings I had with him pertained to Al Cerdo and McGirt.
Now, did John Gotti tell you why he decided that McGirt belonged to the Gambino organized family crime?
He believed it belonged to our family on my decision by overhearing Jojo Carrazzo and Eddie Scandria. Hearing the story, I advised him that he belonged with our family, and that's how he based his decision.
In other words, John told you that Jojo paid Eddie to walk away from McGirt?
No, in meeting Jojo Carrazzo had told me that he had paid, at one time earlier, Eddie Scandria was involved with Buddy McGirt, and they both were involved. And at one point, they weren't getting along, and Jojo Carrazzo paid, I believe it was $5,000 for Eddie Scandria to walk away. They weren't getting along, and Eddie Scandria seemed to be happy to take the $5,000 and walk away. Time after that, He seemed to be doing very, very well in boxing. His status was building, the purses were building, and he seemed to come back into play and wanted to be involved. He admitted that he did take money, but he said that he took the money from old monies that would do. Jojo showed the purses that he fought for, and there really, really was no money involved, and there's no way he could have paid $5,000 or better for backed up money, which came to hundreds. And I believed Jojo was telling the truth, and this is what I told John.
Now, you stated in your opening testimony that you were released by the Colombo family to the Gambino family. What did you mean by that?
Well, in that time, I wasn't a made member. I was on record. I was on record. I was an associate of the Colombo family. I wasn't a made member, and I was put on record with their family. Once you're on record, you belong to that family, and it takes an official release from that family to for you to leave.
Thank you. My time is up.
Senator Cohen or Senator McCain? Senator McCain.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Gravano, for your testimony. It's very interesting. In part of your testimony, you talked about a referee named Joey Curtis that could move Sipes up in the World Boxing Council rankings.
Yes, sir.
And that's the outfit that's headed by Mr. Jose Solomon, I believe.
I really don't know who heads that organization.
You are a fight fan, though.
Yes, I am.
And have you noticed in the past, on other occasions, that someone has moved up in the WBC rankings in time for a fight, and then that person disappears or drops way down again? Have you seen that happen before?
Well, it's common knowledge. I'm not surprised by it. I don't really follow that part of it, but it's basically common knowledge that it can be done. I wasn't sure at that point which sanctioning body did it because I really wasn't involved. Joey Curtis made me aware of this sanctioning body. I don't really know if any other sanctioning body does it or not.
But it was common knowledge that it could be done.
Yeah, it's not something that's a major secret.
If you mentioned two names, Vito Antifermo and Marvin Hagler, as both having mob ties, or have their people having some connection. Is that correct?
Yes.
And they both fought a couple of fights, so that might have been interesting. Could I ask you a couple of other names? Emmanuel Stewart, any connection there?
I know the name, but I don't know of any connection with him.
Mr. Duva?
Mr. Lou Duva, I understood to be with, or close with anyway, people in the Genovese family. If we were going to go back into boxing, we would be able to reach people in the Genovese family. We would probably reach their boss, who was Chin, and find out what could be done. We never got to that point.
And Mr. Don King, you mentioned earlier, had been approached, but had been negative in response. You have no other information about his connections?
I know earlier on, a lot of years ago, this is before John Gotti and myself took over the family, that Don King had reached out for Paul Castellano, and Paul Castellano didn't want to meet with him for whatever reason. So I knew he was around. I knew he had some ties. And when we were considering Snipes and Damiani, we were considering a possible conversation with him for promotional reasons, for obvious reasons. I mean, he literally just about controls a good part of boxing.
Which brings me, but the connection with either Mr. Wynn or Mr. Trump you don't know of no direct connection, except that they did have to do business with these individuals that control the majority of the best fighters. Is that
right? They've done nothing wrong as far as I know, and they're not with anybody as far as I know. They're just in that business, and they would have to deal with people. We would have to reach the people that they would have to deal with in order to talk with them.
Good. I think it's important to make it clear, Mr. Chairman, about some of these individuals. We don't want to tar people with a brush here. You said in your statement that In the case of the Ronaldo Snipes Damiani fight, you said, I'm sure that we would have had no problem in convincing Snipes to lose. Why do you make that statement, Mr. Gravano?
I myself was very close with Snipes. Snipes was broke at that particular point. If we were able to set up a big payday fight, I would have told him that there was X amount of dollars in the purse. I probably would have approached him with some cash under the table. And he was shunned by Don King. He was on the outskirts. He couldn't get any more fights. He was just about over the hill at 30-some-odd years old. And I believe I had enough of a relationship with him to convince him in that respect. And if he would have agreed, I'm sure he would have lived up to it.
At the end of your statement, you say now because the size of the purses has gotten so big over the past 20 years, organized crime is more and more interested in getting back into it. Do you have any specifics of that interest?
Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and check out more of our content. Feel free to give your feedback and suggestions on who we should do next in the comments. This is Infinitely Productions. We love ya!